This is why it's extremely important not to be suckers like the DSA left and the people who refuse to labor criticisms on unions, because failing to critique unions and making our unions strong is what will lead to fascism. Guess who got a new contract for the military-industrial complex? One of the largest contracts in modern history just got rewarded for Palantir to the United States Army. $10 billion. So you have J.D. Vance, who's funded by Palantir, Trump funded by Palantir. The new wave of the Republican apparatus is funded by Palantir, like all the new young blood Republicans. Go ahead, Sean, feel free.
You know who else is funded by Palantir? Adam Smith.
Of course. Jesus Christ.
Lots of Democrats.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, Alexander Karp, who's the CEO of Palantir, he has already maxed out for Adam Smith, even though the election is next year. And another, Peter Thiel, also Joe Lonsdale, these are all deeply dystopian, psychopathic billionaires. I mean, billionaires in general. To be a billionaire, you have to be psychopathic. The system is psychopathic. But these are even sort of next level psychopaths. These are all people who have not only funded Trump and the Republicans and the right wing, but also they are bankrolling Democrats like Adam Smith.
So why do you guys think that we need to give Palantir a $10 billion contract for our military industrial complex? Why do you guys think that Donald Trump proposed a $1 trillion military budget? Just for show? They got fireworks they don't plan on using? That's what they want us to believe, Shama. They are planning for the war against China over Taiwan. They are planning to escalate against Russia. That asshole, I don't got a saving plan on this because it just happened. Trump is sending nuclear submarines to Russia. And I don't mean to toot my own horn too much, but I was calling out these fraudulent MAGA libertarians. How many people I put back on the RBN when I was like, guys, Trump is not anti-war. I can see him easily doubling down on the war that Biden started. And that was very obvious to me because the empire doesn't really change between these puppets in a suit, especially some clown who ran for president because he wanted to be accepted by the establishment in the first place. So this is why it was only a matter of time before Trump continued to expand the war machine, because he's not going to – they need to justify these contracts for Palantir. And that's the number one goal of Donald Trump and MAGA. MAGA was a giant psyop in order to convince a bunch of angry white dudes to accept the new technocratic fascist state that is to come. It's actually very, if I take myself out of it, it's a brilliant play by the ruling class. You plan on introducing this big technocratic fascist state. So what do? You need to get these loyal white dudes on your side. So what do? You focus on the trans issue. Hey, look at trans people in sports right now as you back people who support Palantir. It's very infuriating, but you guys see how the establishment is very brilliant at maintaining its own power. Sharma, I saw you on mute. Do you want to chime in before I get back to our original story?
Yeah, I was just going to comment that they're absolute. I completely agree that this is from a deeply disturbing and dystopian point of view, it's a brilliant move on their part. But in reality, the reason they're able to do this is because of the complete and utter failure of the left to provide an alternative. Yes. And so I think, that's where we also need to talk about, because Trump would not have won if first of all, not that the Democrats are left in any way. The Democrats have never been a party for the working class. They were the party of slavery, for God's sake. They are a party of US imperialism and for the billionaires. But the point being that Trump was so unpopular when he finished his first presidency that Kamala Harris could have lied about any one progressive issue and she could have won the election. But the reason she was not willing to lie is because they don't want to make any promises that they can be held to, because what they want is working class votes in order to win elections just purely for their electoral calculus, but they don't want to give anything to the working class. That strategy has worked for them quite a bit, but now it is starting to fall apart because the the consciousness has risen, especially young people are angry. The Democratic Party is much more exposed. In fact, the genocide, their cheerleading of the genocide has done a lot to expose them. It's also the cost of living crisis. But in the midst of all this, what is the elephant in the room? What is the real thing that's missing? What's missing is any leadership from the left. And it was a tragedy and travesty. It was both a tragedy and travesty that you saw major union leaders like UAW President Sean Fain supporting Kamala Harris, giving, and you want to talk about a blank check? That was a political blank check that was given by the labor leadership to the Democratic Party that has not only been the party of genocide, they have sold out workers over and over again. Biden and the Democrats joined in the breaking of the railroad workers strike. I mean, that one vote should mean that the labor leadership should have said, no way, no politician who votes to break a strike can ever get one more working class or union member vote. Instead, you had Sean Fain on the floor of the DNC proclaiming his undying support for Kamala Harris. And then on the other hand, you had Sean O'Brien, the president of the Teamsters, going and sucking up to Trump and Josh Hawley and all those other monstrous people.
Crazy.
So that was the problem. You had this complete absence of leadership where you had, on the one hand, people cheerleading the Democrats, and on the other hand, people making overtures to Donald Trump and the Republicans. And in the midst of all that, you had the working class being completely sold out, not to mention the Palestinian people themselves.
I think that is one of the reasons why the fraudulent DSA left. I was about to say hate, but hate is too strong a word. I would say they're hesitant and they're scared of you, Shama. Because I got in trouble for making the same criticism of the labor aristocracy. And this is a critique that many Marxists made. We explain how that unions can be pro-worker, they can be revolutionary, or they can become counter-revolutionary. Because what happens when you have a capitalist class who realize that unions is a strong source of power for the working class? So what they do is infiltrate said unions. They pass legislations to weaken unions, and then this is what happened during the 70s, especially during the Reagan era. The capitalist class, one of the best thing they can do is actually infiltrate and become the labor leaders themselves. And the social democrats, the progressive left, they tend to put labor leaders on a pedestal. And I remember this clearly, and this is just a theory, Sham. I think this is one of the reasons why the progressive establishment try to keep their distance from you, is because you are not afraid to make those criticisms of union leadership. Remember, guys, I've made those videos critical of labor unions in the United States years ago. And I remember that there was these DSA people. These people are charlatans, so they love attacking people. Like these people on Twitter, these DSA people, they screenshot my headline calling out one of these labor unions. They see, look, RBN is a right-wing grifter network that is bashing unions now. And guys, that tweet did pretty well. I got beat up because this person put out this false tweet saying that RBN is turning against union, even though our criticism was that the labor leaders sold out the workers. And this is something that many of the progressive left in the United States can't even reconcile with, because they see these labor leaders who team up with Bernie Sanders, and team up with a progressive Democratic establishment, and they assume inherently that they mean well, even though they are serving their own class interests. And one example I give, and I pass it to you, Shama, for any other thoughts, is when I covered the Kellogg strike. I believe the attack on me came when I was covering that, I believe. It was 2 years ago, so my memory kind of foggy. But I remember during the Kellogg strike, I did a hotspot video. I reported how the union leadership undercut the demands of the workers. And whenever you saw a majority report, breaking points, they report Kellogg strike was solved. This is a big victory for the workers. This is how the progressive media apparatus sold the story. They're like, yay, the Kellogg strikes is over. The workers won. Meanwhile, I turn around like, hey, you guys understand that none of the workers got any of their demands because the labor leaders sold them out. But every single mainstream progressive media outlet sold and told the story to their audience differently because they worship the labor aristocracy. They have a top-down approach to organizing where the capitalists who infiltrate the unions are the leaders who we must obey. And you guys see how we got to decolonize our mind and reject that mindset? So, Shama, I'm glad you introduced the subject. I'll pass to you if you have any other thoughts.
Yeah, I think you're raising a very important point, which is the distinction between the labor leadership that ends up selling out the working class and their own members, and the working class and the rank and file of the unions themselves. We need to separate them, and also think of the concept of the unions themselves. I mean, the union, or in other words, working class people, workers collectively organizing in their own interest, is the only way that workers can not only defend against attacks on us, but also the only way that we can go on the offensive and win victories is through workers getting organized, and not just getting organized in principle, but in theory, but actually organizing mass protests, mobilizing the rank and file to major protest actions, to civil disobedience, and most importantly, going on strike. That is the most crucial weapon that workers have to defend our own interests and to go on the offensive to achieve more in a system that is constantly beating down on us and denying us anything close to our fair share, because all the wealth is being siphoned off to the top. We as workers, I mean, this is the character of the capitalist system, where we as workers get only a fraction of the wealth that we create, and the vast majority of it is taken off, is stolen. It's like highway robbery by the billionaire class. But a system like capitalism, where the vast majority of people, billions of people on the planet at this moment, the only way it can dominate the vast majority of people, in order for a few people at the top to continue gaining and maintaining some sort of stability inside the system, is to corrupt the working class itself with their own ideas. So one form in which that corruption has come about over the last 5 decades is what I would call business unionist ideas, meaning the idea that as a labor leader, your job is not to organize and mobilize the rank and file to go to war against the ruling class, against the bosses, because they are at war with you. So in other words, understanding that there's class war, whether you like it or not, and you have to go to war back. Instead of that, business unionism means that the leaders think that their job is to manage the differences between workers and bosses, and that formula always ends up in workers losing out and the bosses gaining. And then the other arm of business unionism is that not only are you trying to make peace with the bosses, that also means that politically you are going to end up supporting the parties of the bosses. So it's no surprise that you have a labor leadership that for the most part refuses to go to battle, go to war against the bosses, and also is tied at the hip to the Democratic Party. So what we need is not just for us to be clear, which I'm sure you'll agree, Nick, is we are not talking about abandoning the union movement. What we need is a reckoning inside the labor movement. We need a revival of the rank and file militancy that we saw in earlier decades. And just one very crucial example to harken back to is how the New Deal was won. I mean, you see these liberal shows constantly praising FDR, Roosevelt, the Democratic president, but he was not the guy who gave the New Deal. He was the guy who had to concede on behalf of the capitalist class. But the reason he was forced to concede was the 3 general strikes that happened in Minneapolis, Toledo, and San Francisco. And those general strikes were carried out by absolutely courageous rank and file workers, led by socialist ideas, by Marxist ideas. In fact, the leaders of these strikes were Trotskyists like myself. So, they were Marxists like us, and they were the ones who went to war against the bosses, and they were able to win victories, like the Teamsters, because they went on a general strike. And in the process of organizing those strikes, they also had to overcome the opposition and gatekeeping by many of the labor leaders. So it's not a new thing. So right now, we need to revive that kind of militancy where we push back against where we have to push back against the gatekeeping by the leadership in order to win any kind of victories, whether we want to win free healthcare for all, funded by taxing the rich, which my campaign is calling for. Or if you look at the minimum wage federally, it is still languishing at an abysmal $7.25. I mean, it's an absolute scandal, but the labor leadership has done nothing to change any of that. And so we need We need a revival of the militancy, and really what we need is revolutionary leadership inside the union movement. And it's not only that, and you need a revival of what I would call class struggle unionism to push back against business unionism. But we have to be clear, this type of corrupt leadership or gatekeeping leadership is not only inside the labor leadership or labor movement, it's also the NGOs and other liberal leaders. Anywhere you have a movement, you'll have those leaders. For example, during the George Floyd rebellion in 2020, the Black Lives Matter movement, you had any number of black misleaders. When we were fighting for the Amazon tax that year, we had any number of black misleaders, saying that the Amazon tax is not a black issue. I mean, keep in mind, this was a tax to fund affordable housing. So I'm just giving that example as that we have to fight back. And actually, we have to take inspiration. Just to introduce this another thing, which is, I think, really important breaking news, is the new party that is being launched in the UK by Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana, who were formerly from the Labour Party. The reason I'm mentioning that is that within the first 3 days, 600,000 people in the UK signed up to be part of this new this new effort to build a new party. That is the kind of opening that exists. That kind of opening exists in the United States also. But the labor leadership is not acting. And to be fair, in the UK, they're not acting either. This is something that has been launched. And really the question that we have to raise is, what will it take to make this party a success in the UK? And in order for that to be success, they will have to fight back against the gatekeepers. If they refuse to fight the gatekeepers, just like unfortunately Jeremy Corbyn refused when he had the labor leadership 3 years ago, it's not going to succeed. That is why we have to learn from history and understand that in your war against the bosses and the capitalists, the only way to succeed is also to overcome the gatekeepers.
Yeah, this is why I'm not interested in entryism at all. I think entryism is a failed strategy. We need to build our own party. And I believe that if we were launched and strongly launched, there would be a lot of excitement, especially over an explicitly socialist, pro-working class, anti-Zionist party who not willing to sell out like the Squad. And I reported on this a few days ago. I think this is a great follow-up because once again, Sean, we can bounce these ideas off. I still got a lot of cover, but let's see how much I can get through, but we can go all day on these topics. I want to share this and I get back on topic here. Like America's largest teacher union. I did a hotspot video on this. The union rejected the proposal from their own members, and there's so many examples of this, who wanted to ban the ADL as a legitimate source because the ADL is a pro-genocide organization. So one of the most reasonable things you can do as a teacher union, like, hey, man, I don't think we should be supporting fascist propaganda. So the union rank and file supported that referendum. And you know what happened? The teacher union leadership struck it down. It was like 75% in favor of it. Look, teacher union members endorsed cutting ties with the ADL. You guys see that's July 8th. July 8th, you had this amazing story. Then July 19th, just a few weeks later, you had 400 Jewish organizations who put pressure on the labor union leadership, and the labor union leadership sided with the fascist Zionists to rob the democracy, rob the votes of their own rank and file in order to support Zionism. So why do they do this? This is another moment where I sit back and I admire the work of the evil ruling class, because there's a lot of anti-union sentiment where I live, Missouri, where we have right to work laws. Why do a lot of people I know, a lot of people in Missouri have anti-union sentiments? Because their unions have screwed them. So what do the capitalists do after seeing the amount of workers' rights that was won by socialists and communists in the 30s and 40s, which led to McCarthyism in the first place? So what they do, they essentially reject all communism and socialism. They force them out of the union leadership. The capitalist class take the role of the leader unionship and then purposely fail the workers. So they win two birds with one stone. So not only do they undermine the workers' demand, the workers get discontent with the unions, and then they become anti-union in response. which is why many workers in Missouri support right to work laws, because they're used to unions like this screwing them. This is why it's extremely important not to be suckers like the DSA left and the people who refuse to labor criticisms on unions, because failing to critique unions and making our unions strong is what will lead to fascism. It will lead to more people rejecting collective bargaining. And that is what happened in Missouri. I'm telling you as someone who lived here. So, Shama, I'll give you last word on the topic if you have anything else you want to add, and then I'll get back to our main topic of the day. But this is an extra segment on unions, Zoya, that we're doing here. Shama, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, you mentioned Missouri. You're in Missouri. The other thing that stands out about Missouri, and really it sort of completes the story about the consciousness of the working class in the face of leadership that's selling them out in the unions and also in other social movements, is that last year, as you know, Nick, the state of Missouri, the voters voted for Trump. Trump got the majority in that state. Trump won the state, and at the same time, the voters also voted in $15 an hour minimum wage and union rights. So all of this might sound contradictory, but it's actually not. In reality, what it shows is that working class people, including many of the people who ended up voting for Trump, many of them who might think of themselves as MAGA, many of them who didn't vote at all, many of them are hungry to fight back against the bosses. They agree with us that we need to fight the billionaire class. But when they have rotten leadership in the union movement or among the liberal leaders, then they end up, at least part of them, becoming enamored with Trump, who we know is a con man who sold people out. I mean, look at the brutal budget that they have passed with Trump's leadership, $1 trillion in cuts to essential services. But I think this whole story shows you that working people can and will be won over to fighting movements. They can and will be won over to a militant working class movement and labor movement. And that is why a big part of our fight, a crucial part of our fight, is against the social movement misleaders, the NGO misleaders, the progressive establishment, and the union leaders who are selling us out.
Very well said. This is what you referenced before. I always like mentioning this story, and this is where the people are like, why you go on Jake Shields? All the loser leftists who they have so much lack of confidence in their ability to persuade. They think it's a waste of time. They lack the ability to persuade people to support socialism so much. They don't think it's worth their time to talk to people on the right. Because as I mentioned 1,000 times before, I wasn't even trying to change Jake Shields' mind, but I'm trying to change the people's mind who listen to him, because I understand, I support the potential of the working class. I understand that most people inherently want to support the material interests. In Missouri, there are a lot of people. It's a extremely socially conservative state. You're not going to find a lot of people in this state that support trans people in different bathrooms. The trans issue in sports is very dominant on the right here. But they're like, if you ask like people in Missouri, they want paid maternity leave, they always vote for it. Here's the vote for increased minimum wage. We had a vote for affordable housing. We had a vote in a referendum which was struck down by the Supreme Court that would have took funds that was overused in local law enforcement and would have went to funding housing and social programs. So essentially, what we've been asking in defund the police, bro, you can ask these, but just take the socialist language out of it, and you ask it to a lot of these Missouri rednecks, and they all for it. Goddamn right, I want some goddamn healthcare. Just don't call it socialism. And that's what a lot of these people on the right, this is what they support. And this is why the liberals who have inherent hatred of these people are misguided. And I want to bring something else, because I don't know if I had a chance to mention this. Did I ever get a chance to mention this on the story? Because I did cover the voter referendum and how we supported minimum wage. Did I show you guys this? Did I show you guys how the capitalist class came together and sued to overturn the will of the voters? So for all the people who believe in capitalist realism, the belief that capitalism would never go away, so we might as well concede to it and fight for small demands, they will never acknowledge it. But that is the belief of democratic socialists, people like Bernie Sanders. They don't call themselves Marxists and communists because they believe in capitalist realism. They believe that capitalism will never go away. The only system that we ever seen in human history that will never go away ever. Completely unscientific belief. The only thing that is consistent in human history is systems dying and evolving. Meanwhile, for some reason, capitalism is the one system that's going to transcend time and never go away. So they believe that we have to negotiate with capitalism and get scrapped from capitalism because there's no point in fighting it for revolution. I am not exaggerating. This is what Democrat socialists inherently believe. But you understand that even if you get meager gains from the capitalist system, whenever the capitalist class feel uncomfortable with what they are giving up, they will then scrap the rule book and show you what true authoritarianism looks like. This is why we say capitalists do not concede without struggle. Now, sorry for that rant. This is what the fuck I'm talking about. Missouri companies sue to stop law that raises the minimum wage and require paid sick leave. And the Missouri Supreme Court, they sided with them. They're like, yeah, we all know about this. And they are siding with the capitalist class and the governor to support overruling the will of the voters for paid maternity leave and the minimum wage. So you guys see what will happen when you go through these capitalist systems and try to negotiate with them? They will change the rules. Even if you beat them at their own game, they will change the rules. Ask Bernie Sanders what happens when you play the rules, how quickly they will change it. So, Shama, any final thoughts you have on this? Any reactions you have to this, I guess I should say?
Just to say that I completely agree with you that capitalism is not a system that can be reformed. It has to be overthrown. And here is really important evidence that winning any meager gains takes an all-out fight. And even when you succeed, even when working people's movements succeed, those gains that we do win under capitalism are constantly under threat by the capitalist class. I mean, in the decade that I was on the Seattle City Council, we not only won the nation's highest major city minimum wage, we also, as some of you know, won the Amazon tax to fund affordable housing every year, new affordable housing every year to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. We won a powerful renters bill of rights. We won historic victories, and every single victory had to be wrested from the hands of the capitalist class here, and also it required a fight against the Democratic Party here. And at the same time, after we won every single one of these victories, we had a lawsuit from the capitalists. I believe every victory that we won, any significant victory that we won, had a lawsuit in the courts. Now, it just so happens that they didn't end up winning any of the lawsuits. But the point is that even when we win reforms after an all knockdown, drag out fight, it still is under threat. And so we should not. We working people need to break from capitalism itself. We need revolutionary movements. And in fact, here's the most important fact that nobody else will tell you except for Marxists, is that it's actually Marxists and revolutionaries who make the best fighters for and winners of reforms. Because if you have the logic of what you're saying, Bernie Sanders, and let's not forget AOC, people who want to make peace with the system and with the system's benefactor, the people who benefit from the system, when you want to make peace with them, it also means that you are actually really shit at winning any reforms either. So that is why you've seen people like AOC and Bernie Sanders. What have they won? We won $15 an hour in Seattle, and that made the Fight for 15 go national, and multiple cities, multiple states, including Missouri, a Trump voting state, won $15 an hour because of our fight here through my city council office. What has AOC won? What has Bernie Sanders won? They made promises, $15 an hour, Medicare for all. They have won nothing. Why? Because, as a matter of fact, it takes a revolutionary understanding not only of the system itself, but for the strategy of how to actually fight the bosses, the strategy of, understanding that you cannot make peace with the bosses and expect to win anything for the working class. What you will get when you sell out working people is a much nicer career. You will get much more peace with Nancy Pelosi. So if that's what you want, then that's what you'll get. but AOC's career interests and what working class people can win to make their lives better, they are two completely different things.
People like Bernie Sanders crack me up. These old gray-haired leftists who wag their finger at us when they accomplish nothing. These people like, don't you know it's impossible to start a third party, Nick? Don't you know it's impossible? What we gotta do? You have to organize within the Democratic Party. Like, sir, you are 60 and you accomplished nothing. You have done this strategy for 40 years. The Bernie Sanders in the social democratic left, look at every single gray-haired leftist who's against the third party movement. They've been using the strategy of running in the Democratic Party to get progressive wins for the working class for 40 to 50 years with nothing accomplished. You have Bernie Sanders attacking other countries, China, Russia. Russia has paid maternity leave, sir. They provide health care to their people. You can criticize their country, but these are things that you fail to accomplish for your own people. So how about you focus on that? And they wag their fingers at third party activists. They will say, don't you know that third parties is impossible to win if you run as a third party? Then they will run an election and they will lose to AIPAC. They'll lose over and over again. They spent 40 years of their life failing. The Bernie Sanders left 40 years failing to accomplish any change for the working class, but they want you to do the same thing. They want you to spend 40 years of your life following Richie Torres, following AOC. Come on, there's Zora Mamdani guy. Let's vote for him and hope we get socialism. They want you to follow the same path of failure. And I'm not doing it, man. Maybe I'm going to be a 70-year-old man and I will have my failures and I will teach the next generation what I failed. But we can't be doing this thing where we make the same damn mistakes over and over again. Shama, I saw you on mute. Do you want to chime in or I can move on? Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, just to say that not only did we win the $15 minimum wage as opposed to AOC and Bernie Sanders, we actually had a massive fight on the city council. We meaning my office and working people on one side, all the other council members who are all Democrats on the other. They're representing big business. We had a massive fight in order to win inflation increases associated with the minimum wage. So today, Seattle's minimum wage is $20.76. Compare that to the federal minimum wage, which is $7.25. Now, is that enough? Obviously not. Again, that's why we are very clear as revolutionaries that we cannot stop at reforms. But the huge irony and really the scientific truth is that it takes revolutionaries to win historic reforms. That is the way the New Deal was won, the whole creation of what became the American middle class. That was the result of revolutionaries, of Marxists fighting in the union movement, building for general strikes, and posing an actual threat to the ruling class. I mean, just to understand, the reason FDR and the capitalists were forced to concede to what became the New Deal was because they were afraid of an actual revolution. They were afraid of the actual pitchforks. So, that is a revolutionary approach to winning reforms. And that goes alongside the understanding that you can't stop at reforms. And that is why we have been so successful in Seattle. And that is the kind of revolutionary understanding we plan to bring not only to our congressional campaign, but if we get elected, that is the kind of approach we're going to use. For example, I have pledged that if I get elected to Congress, my inauguration will be turned into a mass movement in Washington, D.C., with a bill to end all U.S. military funding to the Israeli state and to end the occupation. And
you imagine?
I know. And we will be exposing.
I'm going to. That would be so fucking base, man. Go ahead, Shama.
No, go.
I'm sorry, I get excited because can you guys imagine that was what it would be like if a real revolutionary won? Like no popping champagne, having a bourgeois celebration, but engage in the direct action as a celebration of victory. That's extremely powerful, Shama. That got me excited. So that's very encouraging to hear because that's exactly what we need.